It's 8 o'clock. It is Monday. I'm Tim Madeira.
I'm Doug Hamilton.
And glad you're with us on this Monday morning. Man, I love doing this show, Doug, especially when we get to give away tickets like we did last hour.
Oh, always fun. And I love when I get to get the tickets, but that never happens.
No, it doesn't, Doug, because that's part of the contest rules, which, of course, are found on our website, WRGN.com. Because you work here.
You should set that link in your Kindle. If you have a Kindle, set that link in your Kindle.
What, at WRGN.com?
Yeah, go there, read the rules just before bed. You know,
put you right to sleep.
Good reading.
Well, if you read it, you will find, Doug, that as an employee here of WRGN, you can't win tickets. Neither can your wife or your son.
Right. How about my mother and father?
No, your mother and father can't win them and give them to you either, Doug. Well, we've got some great music this hour. We also will be talking to John Stange. Speaking of giveaways, because we're going to be giving away his book, Desire Jesus.
Yes, and it's a great devotional.
Mm-hmm.
So stay tuned. You're going to be able to hear all about it and get to know John, I would imagine.
I think we'll find out a little bit more about John than we already know. Certainly more than you know, because you've never met him before.
No, but I heard that he worked here, so I think that says a lot.
He did.
I feel like I know him because his DNA has been here.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Is that why they put things like George Washington slept here? Because, you know, his DNA has been
people
there,
get kind of a sense.
Like,
I sense his DNA.
Music from Hawk Nelson as we start this hour. Words.
They've made me feel like a
We're back here on Wake Up Right, and we've got a special guest with us this morning, and I say special in the best way possible.
Right.
It's good to have John Stange back.
Oh, Stange. I thought it was Stange.
Oh, is it John? Am I saying it wrong all these years?
No, Tim, you're saying it absolutely correct.
Oh, okay.
So you're it's no Stange.
It's not.
Okay.
You're welcome to use that.
It sounds very sophisticated when you say that.
And very French.
Yeah. Now, I do want to talk about your background, but I'm not sure I want to go that far into his background as to, family history and all that.
Oh, right, yes.
But, John, our listeners may be familiar with your name because you actually worked here at WRGN for a time.
The reason why I'm here today is because of John. I mean, I wouldn't have, if I hadn't known that he worked here, I was like, I'm not. Did John Stange work here? That's how Tim got me in. John Stange.
So for our listeners, Doug, who are familiar with you, and those who may not be, give us a little history as far as your time here in northeastern Pennsylvania and where you're at now.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I grew up in northeast Pennsylvania and went to Bible college in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. So that's southeast, but then came back to northeast Pennsylvania to pastor a church. I pastored the Cherry Street Bible Church in Plymouth, and at the same time that I was doing that, I ended up directing the Pocono Mountain Bible Conference, which is a Bible conference and church camp up in the Poconos. Mm-hmm. But prior to taking on that secondary role of directing the Bible conference, I had the privilege to work for a time at WRGN at doing production and announcing some things on the air, and really enjoyed that time and learned a lot by working there. I'm surprised how many things I still use right now that I learned in my time working at WRGN. I was a big WRGN listener.
Right.
I remember, and I used to come up and, when you have pastors up and do things from time to time volunteering there at the station, and then I heard an announcement saying you needed an announcer and production director, and I thought, you know what, that would be something I'd really enjoy having the privilege to do. I'm going to apply to do that. And so I had the privilege to spend my mornings from 7:30 to 12:30, Monday through Friday, working at WRGN when my kids were very little, and I loved it.
I do remember that time, and at that time, when you say your kids were little, you actually only had you have 4 children now, right?
Yeah, so 2 weren't even born yet.
Right.
But our oldest 2 were were brand new.
And I actually came across a radiogram a couple of weeks ago with a picture of you on it with the grand opening of the Good News Library.
Oh, wow. That is a throwback then.
Yeah, and I think that was...
It's like 50 years ago.
No, 15, Doug. 15 years ago.
15 years ago, okay.
But it was 15 years ago in October. It does feel like eons. Well, we want to talk with you about a book that you have written, and this is one of many books that you have written. It's called Desire Jesus, 365-day devotional to help encourage, refresh, and strengthen your daily walk with Jesus. And so we're going to do that when we come back. Right now we've got music here on Wake Up Right.
Here I am. Its grip on me.
We're back here on Wake Up Right. We've got John Stange with us by way of phone. John, of course, as we mentioned before that song, from this area originally, then went to Bible college. You went to Philadelphia College of the Bible, it was. Now it's called...
Cairn University.
Cairn. I can never remember, and the pronunciation is what
It's
gets
a tricky name.
It is.
Yeah, Cairn, that's like a Scottish or Irish, isn't it? Or no?
It is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is there a meaning to it, John, that you're aware of?
Yeah, they selected that name. So they've been expanding all the different degrees that they offer there, and they wanted to have a name that could encompass a lot of things once they achieved university status. And so they picked that. I believe the reasoning is because it's like a memorial marker. So a Cairn.
Yes, that's exactly. Yes.
And like a pile of stones. And
so like from the book of Joshua.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So there's a lot of good biblical imagery that they were able to pull from that, and it encompasses a lot of the newer programs that they've been offering there, in addition to the Bible training and things that pastors and others receive there.
Okay, so it had nothing to do with the fact that you could say, we're caring for you.
No. But maybe you could suggest that as
I should.
Slogan for them.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about a book, and that is the real reason that we've got you on here. And that is a book that you've written called Desire Jesus. It is a 365-day devotional to help encourage, refresh, and strengthen your daily walk with Christ. But this is not your first foray into publishing, is it?
No, it's not. But this is definitely the most extensive.
Okay. What are some of the other titles that you have written?
So a lot of the books that I've written have been inspired by needs that I've experienced in day-to-day life with working with people as a pastor and needs in my own life. And so a lot of the things that I've written have to do with biblical counseling or Christ-centered counseling, things of that nature. So I've written a book called Overcoming Anxiety. It's a short book that looks at some of the biblical principles that are spoken of related to dealing with anxiety. I've also written another book called Overcoming Negative Self-Talk with the Truth of the Gospel. And it shows how the gospel speaks into the messages that sometimes we preach to our hearts that are actually the opposite of what Scripture is teaching. And a lot of the issues that I noticed that just we all in general and many of the people that I've had the privilege to work with in counseling deal with come back to this message that we preach to our hearts that isn't in line with what the gospel actually says. So it's aiming to correct that with what the Scripture actually teaches. I've also written a small book called Building a Christ-Centered Marriage, and it's a book that goes through some of the principles that Scripture teaches related to what it looks like to ultimately conduct our marriages in a Christ-honoring way.
Right.
And what it looks like to actually build a marriage on that foundation. And so those would be some of my favorites that I've written.
Oh, that's great.
There's a variety of others that would be, some things based on different series that I've preached and things like that. But yeah, writing's turned into a bit of a fun hobby, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do it from time to time. How much you can write when you just turn off the TV and write instead of watching TV in the evening. Feels more productive.
That is the truth. I mean, we say, oh, well, I wouldn't have time to do that, and really it is in some ways a matter of priorities. And as we look at the book, Desire Jesus, a one-year devotional, this had to take a lot of time because obviously, you're taking the time to put together a thought for each day. Did you go through a whole year writing a thought each day, or did you, take the time to sit down oft times for several hours maybe and put together a week's worth or 2 weeks worth? How do you go about doing a book like this?
For the most part, I took it in daily and wrote it out daily. So the book did take about a year to write.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
There were some stretches where, you kind of get like this flood of inspiration and you might do
flows.
several days worth at a time.
Yeah.
I paced to make sure that the book was written in a year or less. So I know there were times where I had to either go to conferences or on vacation,
Right.
that I took the time preparing beforehand to actually write a little extra so that, during those times I stayed caught up and didn't fall far behind. But no, the book took about a year to write. I mostly did it a day at a time because I didn't want to rush through it. I didn't want to just try and produce content to say that I had words on the page. I wanted to make sure that each day's devotional was a thoughtful treatment of whatever portion of Scripture we were looking at for
Well,
that
see, there
particular
goes
day.
there goes my future in writing. If I can't just put words down, I'm not interested.
Was thoughtful to keep her.
Doug is nothing if not thoughtful. Wait, is that a double negative there? I'm not sure. No, as I looked at the book, and of course you start, as most devotionals often do, with a scripture verse, and then some expounding on that scripture verse. A page per day as you go through the book. And when we come back, I want to go to a song. When we come back, I want to find out what your hope is beyond the obvious with the title, Desire Jesus, for people as they go through this daily devotional. More music, and we'll be back with John Stange. We're back. We've been talking with John Stange, the author of Desire Jesus, a one-year edition. It is a 365-day daily devotional to help encourage, refresh, and strengthen your daily walk with Christ. We've gotten to know a little bit more about John and chat with him, even about his time here at WRGN. You mentioned, John, that you learned a lot that you are still using, and I guess one of those things is you're still doing some voice work, right?
That's true. I learned a lot about proper recording and editing and things of that nature working up at WRGN. And so since that time, just as a side hobby, I've been doing a fair amount of voiceover work. It's been pretty regular. Also as another hobby, just hosting a couple podcasts that encourage people to be in the scriptures, and all the recording and editing and the tools to use and the software to use. All that I gathered from my time up at WRGN. So that was an extremely instructive and beneficial time for me.
Oh, that's
Very
great.
grateful for it.
Now, if you're doing podcasts, that must be a place that people can go to hear you. If they've listened to you this morning and said, oh, I'd love to hear some more of what he's done, where do they go?
They would just go to my website, which is DesireJesus.com.
All right, Desire Jesus.
The podcasts are listed there.
Okay, DesireJesus.com, which of course is the name of your devotional, Desire Jesus. And if you want to get the book, you might want to tune in today during Connect Live, because we're going to be giving away this book during Connect Live all week this week, in fact. Or you can go to John's website, DesireJesus.com, DesireJesus.com. Now, as I said when we were going to that last song, the obvious reason for writing this devotional would be to desire Jesus.
And all the things that he wrote on the front of the book that really describes the reason for writing it. But apart from that, John, apart from how well descriptive you were, come up with something else that you might have wanted us to get from it.
Yeah. So here would be bonus content just for you. All right.
All right. Thanks, John. I'm glad you're able to overcome whatever it is Doug throws at you.
That's right. You may have noticed this, and I've certainly noticed this, that sometimes there's a lot of well-intentioned devotional content that could be very light. And I've come across different books that through the years that seem like they were going to be promising. And there's not a whole lot of information on the page. It's just more like a quick thought or a quick story. And I didn't want to do that. There's plenty of that out there. I really wanted it to be the kind of book that enabled a person, if they picked it up and read it, to start their day focusing on Christ and who he is and what he does in our lives. And I wanted to hit it from multiple areas. So, like the intellect, the emotion, and the will. So something where we could look at a portion of Scripture and think about it intellectually. What's the data or what's the background maybe for certain portions of Scripture? how does it make us feel emotionally? How does that impact us emotionally? And what does the Lord want us to do with this information? How does he actually want us to put this into practice and live it out? And I wanted to do that all from a Christ-centered perspective, showing that wherever we are in the Scriptures, whether we're looking at an Old Testament Scripture or a New Testament Scripture, the totality of Scripture is trying to point our hearts to Jesus Christ.
Right.
And so that was my intent. That was my premise in writing each of these devotionals. Really wanted it to be something that had some meat to it, that connected with, all avenues of us being who God has created us to be, showing us that all the Scriptures point us to Jesus, and that's a great way for us to be just gearing our minds to approach each and every day.
Oh, that's great.
That was very good.
And thus the title, Desire Jesus.
Yeah.
And
now we just need you to break that down into like a 30-second spot.
The admonition to you, Doug, not to judge a book by its cover. Hey, John, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us this morning. We will indeed be giving this book away all week this week, but I encourage you to check out John's website, DesireJesus.com. DesireJesus.com. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome.